called Born in the Bronx, a visual record of the early days of hip-hop. And then, once the book was released, Johan wanted to institutionalize the collection. And he met Catherine Reagan, our curator of rare books and manuscripts, who, please also give a round of applause. That's my boss. And the best one ever. Right? So the collection came to Cornell because Johan met Catherine, and they both decided that Cornell is the place that has the resources, the place that has the facility, the place that has the institutional goals and culture to utilize something as important as the history of hip-hop in its academic pursuits. Just recently, a class concluded last semester called Hip Hop, Beats, Rhymes, and Life. And that class was co-taught by the music department, the English department, and Africana Studies and Research Center. I know Kia's right here. Yes, sir. Class of 13. Was also one of the most participatory vocal students in the class, so big ups. So there's been a tremendous amount of activity. The archive of Ernie Panacoli recently joined the hip-hop collection. The archive of Charlie Ahern, the director of Wild Style, the first film about hip-hop, recently joined the archive. We have the archive of Scene, Richard Mirando, who is a golden age graffiti writer. The International Graffiti Times. Anyone ever heard of the IG Times? All right, that's a couple of folks in the corner. These original materials tell the story of hip-hop. They tell the story of what it really, really comes from. Dispossessed youth growing up in very, very harsh circumstances, finding their voice by creating new art forms, by collaging old art forms, older music and technology into new art forms. Without that particular knowledge, we don't really understand hip-hop culture. We can understand rap music, but can we really understand hip-hop culture? These materials are going to be preserved for hundreds of years so that the world can know about hip-hop culture in the future. I want to, as I said, invite Johan to say a few words. He is right there. And after he does that, I'll introduce our moderator.
Hi guys, thanks for coming out. So when I started pursuing a major archive devoted to the early history of hip hop in the late 90s, I did so with the core reason for doing it was to have a serious academic institution with maximum muscle support and protect this important historical narrative and this narrative of grassroots entrepreneurship at its most entrepreneurial and at its most grassroots, no doubt. So I was like the guy in Singing in the Rain, that I would like knock on doors and attempt to like show my stuff and see if I could dazzle anybody. And certainly met with a few cold shoulders. I got my foot in the door a couple of times, but the first time that I spoke to a librarian for a serious academic institution that checked every box, and that in our first meeting started talking about symposiums, about exhibitions, about community outreach, and about how to involve the actual pioneers of the movement in teaching and communicative capacities, was Catherine Reagan. So when we started working together in 2007, the notion was to take this collection globally, to take this collection and utilize it, you know, bridging different communities, different schools, and also to utilize the archive to further minority entrepreneurship and all that comes with that. And we have been very, very lucky to develop a hip-hop advisory board with some of the sharpest minds that I've met, Cornellians that have grown up with a love for hip-hop and also a love of entrepreneurship in popular culture. So the quest is ongoing. We always need money. We need money for additional archive acquisition. We need money because there's a 4.5-hour bus ride up to Cornell that somebody has to pay for, and we have to get hotels and per diems and all of that kind of stuff for the people that we bring up to teach and to communicate. And we also tend to underwrite activities that take place off campus in Ithaca as well. So you have officially been hit up. And with no further ado, my good friend, the mighty Rich Medina, will lead us off.
Let me introduce Rich. Thank you, Johan. Thank you. Please give it up for Johan. Rich Medina, class of '92. Yeah. Yeah. Rich is from Lakewood, New Jersey. And he has risen to be one of the most popular, if not the most popular, DJ in Philadelphia, PA, and New York City. Rich has consistently taken multi-ethnic crowds on a sonic journey through hip-hop, house, Afrobeat, funk, and soul for almost 20 years. Rich actually introduced a whole new generation to Afrobeat music, going as far back as 2000 with Jumpin' Funk. Anybody ever heard the Jumpin' Funk? Mm-hmm. The first and most consistent U.S. dance party dedicated to Fela Kuti. Rich and the Jumpin' Funk brand recently traveled all over the country, celebrating the re-release of Fela's catalog. In addition to his own events, Rich has performed in front of crowds of thousands, DJing shows with artists like Lauryn Hill, De La Soul, Erykah Badu, Seun Kuti, Tony Allen, Nathan Haynes, Roy Ayers, Gil Scott-Heron, The Roots, Jill Scott, Antibalas, Zap Mama, Femi Kuti, among many, many others. In the summer of 2010, Rich was selected to be one of 7 DJs to compete on the first reality show about DJs, Master of the Mix. Anybody seen Master of the Mix? It was on BET and Centric from 2010 to 2011. So Rich came to us skeptically. Last summer, he was in town for his 20th reunion. And I hit him up on Twitter. And I said, hey man, I'm a fan. Can you come check out the hip hop collection while you're on campus? He said, yeah, no doubt. So he came through, saw me, and said, oh, like, that's what a curator looks like. I'm not sure I was expecting that, dude. We took him downstairs. What's that noise? You hear that noise? That humming noise? Is that weird? People online, I'm not sure you caught that. Hello. And we hit it off, and that very day, Rich became one of our most involved, vocal, participatory members of our advisory board, which is where I got my start with the hip hop collection, by the way. So it was only natural that Rich moderate a panel like this, of this caliber, with his knowledge of the culture and the industry. I want to turn it over to Rich to introduce the rest of our panelists, so please give it up to Rich Medina.
That was thanks, Ben, for the ultra generous introduction. How's everybody feeling this afternoon? So, being that a vast majority of us have did a 4-year bid at a place called Cornell University in upstate New York, I gotta ask, how many of you would have ever figured you'd be sitting in a room like this talking about hip-hop in 2013? Anybody? Show of hands. Right, me neither. So we're on the same page. before I get into my contribution to today, I would like to have our esteemed panelists introduce themselves to you so you can get a perspective on who you're going to be hearing from as the panel moves forward. So without further ado, allow me to introduce David M. Ehrlich, class of '82, Londell McMillan, '87, Michael Seltzer, class of '89, and Antoinette Trotman, '87. I'll let them break you down on why they are in front of you today.
Hi, I'm Dave Ehrlich, and thank you for having me here. I'm here, one of the reasons, because I was invited, and whenever I'm invited for a Cornell activity, I try to participate. It just so happens that I segued from my Cornell education into a legal education, and from there, somehow I got involved in the hip-hop business at its earliest roots. And we'll talk more about that, but I guess the start of my career in hip-hop was working with a producer named Prince Paul, and he introduced me to the world of hip-hop, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, I'm Londell McMillan, and I'm going to defer to Antonette Trotman because she was in my class, and if there's any one person I owe most to really jumping off my career in my business, it would be her.
Thank you, Londell.
So I'm going to defer to her.
Okay. Hi, I'm Antoinette Trotman, class of '87. It was interesting. Cornell was, I kind of fell into it. I was, from Trinidad. My family came up here and didn't know anything about the education system. And I went to Cornell because it was pretty. And I think the same thing with falling into the music industry. When I was at Cornell, my main love, I'm very political, and we were at the rallies, I did the sit-ins, it was, anti-apartheid, it was, that was me. Music was not the thing that I was thinking of going into. But I do remember sitting at Ujima, and someone was speaking at Ujima, and they said, we need more black lawyers and doctors, and we have enough singers and actors. And I remember that struck me as strange. I was like, why? No, this is an amazing opportunity for our people. This is something that, we do well. The problem is that we don't own our resources. And it just started me into this whole music industry quest. The first place I went to was not in hip hop. I worked at a record company called Instinct Records. It's an indie rave electronica label. Moby was our artist. So I rolled in there. I had worked at a big law firm. I was at Philip Neiser. I was working on the Love Canal case. I hated it. And they said, there's an opening, one of our clients who has someone who can actually read a contract and is smart. So I came to this loft in Chelsea. I had my pearls on because that's what you're supposed to do. And I walk into the loft, and I don't think anyone even had shoes on. And they all looked at me like, what are you doing? It was like rave heads. But I was there. They hired me anyway. I was there as their director of business affairs, and I did their royalties, and we were very, very hands-on with everything. It was, we swept the floors, we did the contracts, we did everything, and it was great for 2 years. Then here comes Londell McMillan, and lo and behold, he's in music. And I thought too, I was like, Londell's in music? I thought he was going to be like a congressman or something. And he said, Antoinette, I am the only transactional lawyer at a litigation firm, and all the paralegals here, they don't know what I'm doing, and I need help. And I jumped at it because he's my friend, and because it was a type of music, he was involved in the type of music that I wanted to be involved in. And we talked about creating a conglomerate, just a industry-wide, industry-dominant, black-owned firm, and it was just going to be amazing. And we were not even 30 yet, and no one told us we couldn't do it. So we just decided, let's just do it. I worked with Londell for about 7 years, Prince was one of our clients, and Shaka Khan was one of our clients, and I remember Roberta Flack playing the piano in the off-key piano in the office, and starting with, you know, and then the hip-hop artists we started with Rough Riders. We were working with them from the very beginning. Joaquin came up in there, and he was like determined to have Londell as his attorney. And Londell was like, yo, tell him if he has a retainer, we'll do it. So he came up with some cash and some checks, and we started.
In a brown paper bag.
And they had nothing signed, but just working with the energy that they had, the presenter talked about minority entrepreneurship, and this was exactly what we were talking about. We started working with people who had a dream and just cobbled together the reality, and being part of that, you know, experience was amazing. So we had artists like, we worked with Murder Inc., and we worked with Rough Riders, and we worked with everybody. It was amazing. It was an amazing ride. And then I finally left Londell. And he told me I was going to the dark side when I went to the record company.
Called Def Jam.
I started
Dark side.
Dark side. He was like, oh God, you're with the Empire now. So I started Def Jam in 2000.
They paid her 3 times what I could afford.
Things changed. I had a baby, and it's like, Londell, we have to do this. I went over to Def Jam, and we worked a lot with Def Jam because we had a lot of the artists there. And I called Lior, and I was like, I need something, you know. And he said, come on over. So I started working at Def Jam in 2001 in business and legal affairs, and I'm still there. I work with Michael Seltzer now. So I have 2 bosses and ex-bosses up here, so I have to be very careful what I say. But it's given me a perspective because working very, very closely, hands-on with our artists. We were very, very hands-on with our artists when we were working with Londell, and seeing that creativity from one side, and then coming into the corporation and the record label, and recognizing, you know, this is not a beast. This is the same kind of people who are passionate about music. They're also passionate about making money, but they're passionate about music. They're passionate about the artists' careers, and we can develop them being part of that. And that's what I did.
By the way, we work for AT. No matter what she says, she runs that shop. So at Cornell, I think I did know that I was going to be in the music business in some respect. I didn't know it was going to be hip-hop necessarily. I was fortunate enough to fall into that. But I was born in Philadelphia, in Overbrook Park, same apartment complex Will Smith grew up in, and Troy Carter, for that matter, manages Lady Gaga. And from early on, my parents encouraged me, my older brother, and my sister to be musicians, to be active in the arts, and they are, and still are, my greatest mentors, and they're watching right now from Boca Raton, Florida. So hi, Mom. So at Cornell, I played bass. I played all through junior high, high school. I played bass guitar, upright bass. I played jazz, blues, rock. I played in the Cornell Orchestra. I was on the Cornell Concert Commission, where we did great things. I was really proud of that, and there's still a lot of great things going on, even more so. It's grown and grown. It's unbelievable what it is now. But at the time, we got Stevie Ray Vaughan to come play one of his last concerts ever, and we had Robert Cray come perform on Slope Day. And it was a special Slope Day for me. It was where my wife, well, my girlfriend at the time, we had our second date ever. And we were there, but as you know, the drinking age was younger, so we were having a good time.
No, it wasn't.
It was well, in any event, and yeah, I was there in a bathing suit. We were watching Robert Cray, and my roommate came up behind me and yanked my shorts down to my ankles. So 3,000 people anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, that was something I'll never forget. But it all worked out okay. So from there, from Cornell, I went on to law school in the city. I went to Cardozo, where we have some alumni and some students who are at Cardozo tonight. It specializes in entertainment law. I took all the intellectual property courses I could, and interned at Polygram at the time, which was, at the time, the largest of the 6 major record companies. It's since been bought by Universal, which is ironically the smallest of the record companies, and now is the largest. So I was there for about 5 years at Polygram in the corporate legal department. I went from there to Island Records, which was a dream of mine. It was like a jewel in the crown. Had some hip hop, Eric B. and Rakim and a couple others, but for the most part, it was known for Bob Marley and U2, and it was the most eclectic, rock label in the business, in history maybe. And worked for Chris Blackwell, who was the founder of the company, and without doubt my mentor on the professional side of my life. Had an amazing time there. It was through mergers of the different labels that I ended up working with Def Jam. So they merged together Island, Def Jam, Mercury, London Records, and a few others, consolidated the teams. And I was lucky enough to work with some incredible people that I never thought I would, and didn't really know all that much about them until I got to work with them. So it was Leor Cohen, Kevin Miles, Russell Simmons, obviously, then L.A. Reid. Jay-Z was our president of Def Jam, which was a phenomenal experience. And currently it's Barry Weiss, who's a Cornell grad as well, who's also phenomenal. And he's our boss, so really phenomenal. But really, he is. Let's see. So I guess my greatest hip-hop moment was when Jay was our president. Aside from working on the deal that brought him in to be our president, and this label deal and all that, and he is who he is. There aren't words to express, He's
great.
He's great. But he and LA called me up to an A&R meeting they were having one day. So naturally, I was freaked out. They don't call lawyers up to the A&R meetings. So I was grabbing notes. What could possibly be bad? And I go into the
A&R meeting.
Well, you're Londell McMillan. I go into the meeting, and Jay and LA lead a standing ovation for me because I had just closed a big deal for them. They were excited about it. It was a Rick Rubin deal. He had just produced the last Johnny Cash album after he had died. So I was like single-handedly responsible. They were really, and that was, so anyway, who can say they got a standing ovation from Jay-Z?
Wow. Absolutely.
Thank you. This final point is a great expression. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. And it brings us to why we're all here. We went to Cornell University. We could have done anything with our lives. We choose to do this. We're still in it because of the people I just mentioned, the connection to those people, being a part of the family, being embraced by, the hip-hop community, and the passion for music is at the core of it, naturally. So that's why I do what I do.
Cornell, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the beautiful memories and most importantly, the beautiful people. And before I get into it, like I said before, Antoinette, that's my girl. We were pre-freshman summers. What was that? Pre-freshman summer, 83.
16 years old.
We were both 16 years old. Wow. Looked at Antoinette, and then I saw coming down, was a Queens girl, Tammy Lucas, who's now Tammy. Tammy came in, and then I was like, wow. And then I shortly soon thereafter met Gligor Tashkovich, my class president, and still my class president. And then I recruited up a year thereafter a guy who went to high school with me, who we used to call Slick, because he used to run around with big waves and his radio on his shoulder and a bomber jacket and sheepskin hat.
You have a gold tooth with a
Be careful, he's here.
Where is he?
Can we get Slick to stand up, please? Give a hand, Slick. He's now running director of Hunter's African American Studies program. Anthony. So I know we're here to talk about hip-hop, but hip-hop, there would be no hip-hop if people didn't really express their experiences, right? Because it's really started as an expression. And, I'm an attorney, producer and publisher. You've heard my legal history through Antoinette, so I won't really go into it, but I will say that, lawyers are servants, right? We serve clients, and I wouldn't be anywhere if I didn't have great people who assisted me provide a quality service, but mostly if I didn't have the kind of clients who came from the culture, who inspired me to come into the culture in the first place. The culture has kind of changed quite a bit. We'll get into that, but I started back with Houdini, and then to one of my best friends, who you forgot to mention him way before the Rough Riders, Dougie Fresh.
Dougie Fresh.
Oh, come on, you gotta give a shout out to Dougie Fresh.
Yes.
And then there were others like LL Cool J that I represented over the years, including AT left out, LL Cool J.
Sorry.
From Nas.
I was trying not to brag.
Oh, yeah, all right. But I'm just going to put it out there for all the people watching, you know, the kind of scope that Cornell creates, and you can make this happen. For LL Cool J, Nas, Scarface, you know, to Kanye West, who we can tell a lot of Kanye West stories, you know, where his mother was like, Mr. McMillan, you need to represent him. He was in a jam, and she literally escorted him to my office, and we got him out the jam. The rest is history. To Little Kim, to clients like The Source magazine, which if you're talking about a collection, and you don't have The Source magazine in your collection, and I'm not doing this as a shameless plug because I'm now the owner and publisher, then we need to have a conversation. Not even a negotiation, a conversation. To acquire The Source magazine, it was started, it's our 25th anniversary, two white boys actually from Harvard University in 1988 who respected the culture enough and saw what was going on in urban America to really try and, you know, put together a business that would grow this culture. And that's why the culture is now multicultural and it's international, you know, because there were commercial forces. You know, some would say not always to the benefit of the hip-hop culture, and we'll get into that, but there were people who said, this is important. We need to celebrate this. We need to chronicle this early. We need to get this information out. We need to commercialize it. And The Source magazine, in its ups, downs, all the way around, has been, I say, the pivotal force, the Smithsonian of the culture from a journalistic standpoint from '88 to now. And I'm happy to have acquired that property and want to work with everybody here so that we can continue to build on it and make it as authentic as it should be. But then I became a producer, producing television shows, music albums, you know, from shows like Lil' Kim's Countdown to Lockdown, right before she went to prison, kind of go through the emotions of what she was doing, to Black Girls Rock, which I'm the executive producer of for a number of years for the Black Girls Rock program. Very proud of that. I grew up with Jay-Z, actually. He won't give me a standing ovation. We actually grew up in the same housing projects community in Brooklyn, not too far from each other, went to the same junior high school. We both invested in the Barclays Arena. So that's another example of how people from that culture can grow. He did it his way. I always tell people, Jay-Z and I, we grew up in the same neighborhood, talk about the same things. I never sold drugs in my life. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about hip-hop and people talking about what they did, let's be clear that the community that people come from, people make choices in life, right? I went to Cornell University, so can I get a hand for that? So the final piece is I'm very excited to, I'm gonna stop so we can get into it, but I hope as we go through it, we talk about the art of the hip-hop culture, we talk about the art of it, we can talk about the business of it, and we can talk about the impact of it, which is the culture. What was its impact as we explore it, and as it has grown? So back to you, Mr. DJ.
Wow. So as you can see, I am amongst sharks, barracudas, snipers. So this is a very real situation, and we're here fundamentally to begin this dialogue with regard to the notion of entrepreneurship, being going out on your own, doing something that you have a very serious feeling about, and turning it into a means to feed your family, pay your bills. That's the basis of where we're from. If there's ever a culture in the United States that speaks to that vocabulary without the Queen's English, it's hip-hop. The great Amin Ra, Africa Bambaataa, our current and first visiting scholar at Cornell University for the hip-hop collection, would say that there are 5 elements to hip-hop. There's DJing, b-boying, which the commercial world usually calls breakdancing, and is completely wrong. When we get into that, so that's a rabbit hole for a whole other panel. MCing, or the host of the event, or the man of the hour on the microphone, and graffiti art. And Bear would say, knowledge of self. These are the 4 tenets of hip-hop culture. Started way back from the early 1970s when Africa Bambaataa saw the movie Zulu, went to Africa, came back to New York City as the leader of the Black Spades, which was the most dangerous and aggressive gang on the East Coast of the United States, and had an epiphany and said, you know what? There's a whole other way for me to use this power. Rather than pushing people around for turf and for money and for clout in the street, we can really take care of the South Bronx. We can walk kids home from school. We can make sure mothers coming from the grocery store got somebody safe, somebody walking with them to keep them safe while they take their food home. We can do after-school programs. We can do the type of things that will make us be viewed in a completely different light than we have been to date, because as of today, everybody's horrified of us. And further, everybody's horrified of where we're from. So you have to imagine sitting under these beautiful halogen lights and all this, these fantastic chairs, the type of vision that it took under such blight. I could use Obama words like that. It's a $10 Obama word. I could use that in this company. Under that type of blight, the vision that it takes to say, yo, this is wrong. We need to approach things in a different manner. Now you fast forward to those of us who study the culture, and many would say, oh, hip-hop, that means like Africa Bambaataa and Cool Herc came along, and all of a sudden, all these killers and robbers were like, hey, man, I don't want to stick you up today, but let's dance it off. You know, let's DJ it off, you know, let's have a battle. You know, it wasn't that simple. It took a very, very, very long time for the tenets of the culture to become ingrained, and what ended up happening was the development of your up-and-coming DJs, MCs, graffiti writers, and B-boys and B-girls were brought about because all of a sudden, some of these kids who were involved in the wrong thing because there were no after-school programs, there were no other things for them to get into, all of a sudden they were practicing dancing, DJing, painting, and rhyming so much that suddenly they were off the street and they had something different to do. Now you fast forward to the commercialization of that, which usually has an extremely negative connotation. In the street, when you hear people talk about the commercialization of hip-hop, it's usually a bitter, angsty dialogue from folks that weren't able to capitalize on it. But in this context, we're going to speak about it in a different way. Because for some of you, and some of us, if it wasn't for the commercialization of hip-hop, I know for myself, I wouldn't have a job. And some of us wouldn't listen to some of the music that we listen to, or wear our pants, or our shirts, or the colorways that we put together the way we do, if it weren't for the commercialization of hip-hop, and it's suddenly showing up in front of you through your television, through your radio, or through your smartphone, or your dumb phone, or whatever you use. So let's start our dialogue off from that standpoint, to understand where the culture comes from. And then with the esteemed panelists we have here, we want to get into the historical perspectives on the art form, first of all, and then talk about the creative and artistic side, which, as you've already heard, these ladies and gentlemen have represented and managed and promoted and produced over the years. So I would just like to allow everyone a few minutes to expound on fundamental ideas with regard to the business of hip-hop, so that we could get a full range of perspective from all of your experiences. So with regard to the creative artistic side, we all have varying relations to our initial understanding of hip-hop, but for each of you coming into it, how did you see the idea of taking artists, which at the time they were A&R budgets and artist development budgets and things like that, which is totally different now. What was your experience with dealing with artists and looking at hip-hop with new eyes in your new jobs?
I mean, are you talking, I have it from both perspectives, right? So when I first started on the artist side, I wasn't thinking about budgets and the like. It was really just about, there's this young kid who has a dream, who has an idea, who's an artist and who wants to express their art and make money, right? So our role in that was, let's get them as much money as possible. Let's get them placed in the venue that's going to nurture them the best, that understand them the best. Sometimes we would have artists come in and say, well, so-and-so is promising me, $1 million, and you're like, that's nonsense. blowing smoke up your, basically, your ass. They're not going to be able to let you breathe. They're not good. Then they don't understand who you are. And so talking to artists in that way, in that format. And when I think of hip hop, I don't just think of, you know, the rapper. We had artists who were producers. They had people who were really, truly entrepreneurs and wanted to create something. And when you were putting them with a partner, from the perspective I think that Londell and I had was try to have as much ownership and control of your product as possible. It's not always about the budget, but you want to get out there to the widest audience possible. Who can bring you there? Flipping it on the other side to being on the corporate side of it all, budgets are important. You know, money is important. Trends are important. And you have to have, we work with A&Rs who they have their, supposedly have to have their fingers in the street and on the pulse and know what's going on and bringing us the right act. Labels have changed. Sometimes even though an act was going to be really, really successful, it didn't work with the brand. And so you couldn't properly market that person, so you would have to pass sometimes. But nowadays it's a little different because our dynamic is not coming from the energy so much always from the street. Now it's coming from, the energy comes from YouTube. The energy can come from tweets. People are following it, so it's a little bit more nebulous. It's a little harder to track down and hold on to. But it really has morphed, and you don't have that big production company energy anymore. So you know, so they're bringing you their brand. Now it's more of a one-off type situation.
If I could talk about, you mentioned producers and their importance in the business. The way that I started out in the hip hop business was what I had noticed was that in the sort of traditional rock and roll business, there were a lot of experienced managers, there were a lot of experienced lawyers, and then you went over to see the world of hip hop, and quite frankly, there weren't, particularly in the management area. And for my personal experience, I was actually living in Los Angeles at the time, and there was this kid, Prince Paul, that was doing all this great stuff. He didn't have a manager, and you know, I was talking to him, and he couldn't even get a meeting with somebody, and which is kind of crazy because he was probably one of the most prolific guys at the time, and that's, you know, from my perspective, I said to myself, you know, the people that are involved in this business need representation, and there was nobody there to provide it. And talking about entrepreneurship, I think you have to recognize those vacuums in the business, and you have to be willing to step into those vacuums. And even fast forwarding to today, for those of you that are interested in going into the business, people say the record business dead, there's no money to be made. I don't think that's the case. I think there is a thriving music business. It's just very diffused right now. And if you can find the right vacuums to step into, and there are a lot of them, you could actually, there's people who are doing phenomenally well in music right now because they have identified and located areas where people are not even looking. And I think that's the key to being a successful entrepreneur in our business.
Well, you know, for me, I think it's a question of what is the asset or the product or the service or the goal, and that'll determine a lot. You know, if we're talking about the music, that's one thing, right? The record business has taken a hit because of technology. The music business has proliferated because of technology. So with, you know, new markets, global expansion, all these is going to, especially in the integration of technology, you're going to have steady, constant change. As technology changes, there's going to be new opportunities. So you always have to look at that. So to all those watching who are in school now, understand technology is your new distributor. So trying to understand how that process works is going to be key to not just the hip hop and music business, but in pretty much any business that we will see going forward. But
Can you break that down a little further, that point about technology being a new distributor? Because I think that's a really interesting.
Technology is the new distributor because as new innovation creates new forms of ways people consume information and content and other platforms, is going to be shared and is going to be sold and commercialized in those ways. And so technology also is a part of constant change and evolution. So that's something that's new that wasn't as prevalent back in the day when they talk about those four tenets. Okay, and those tenets changed quickly. The historians and the scholars, I respect you, I love you. But in reality, those scholars are in the scholar world, right? Like I love scholars, like I love it. My minor was Africana Studies. No disrespect, my brother, and scholarship. But my major was Industrial Labor Relations. That's feet on the ground, real work, management, labor, getting something built, widgets. So having that kind of duality is very important when you're understanding how things are changing. So I get the scholarship of it, and I get the romance of that era. But it was always about aspiration too, right? They were always talking about aspiring to do something, to evolve, to grow. They were talking about upliftment, business, getting it out there. So the product at the time was primarily a music-based product. And then you started seeing fashion products, merchandising products come aboard, right? You started then seeing television. Will Smith and all those cats started hitting the TV screens and live in color.
What?
All of that. Film, big. Look at Hollywood right now. The biggest actors and actresses of color has come from hip hop. Period. Just let's go down the list from Will Smith, to Queen Latifah, to Jamie Foxx. They all come from the hip hop culture. Now I didn't say they were all rappers, even though Will Smith was the first rapper to receive a Grammy. So whether it's an event, whether it's ad campaigns, I want you to understand this. Technology is now integrated with new media, ad campaigns, music, culture, to sell consumer products, all type of products. So the question becomes, what are you seeking to create? And then when you determine what you're trying to create, you'll see a certain way in which all of these things are starting to happen, right, in different ways. So some people come to the hip-hop table from a different perspective. Some people are coming to the hip-hop table from a art purist perspective, and I respect it, I love it. Some people are coming from a merchant and from a commerce perspective. Some people are coming from a technologies perspective. So all of those things are very, very interesting. And to your point about when you got into hip-hop, there weren't as many experienced managers and so forth, because hip-hop was young back in the day. Rock and roll was older. Hip-hop is today's rock and roll.
I was young back in the day.
Yeah, you were young back in the day. We were all young back in the day. But Antoinette will tell you, we were sitting there one day, I said, we're going to make hip-hop the new rock and roll. That's what our goal was. I used to go in the meeting and say, I need rock and roll money.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And when they started paying rock and roll money, the labels then had to start treating it like a real business because they had to recoup.
Right.
Well, now rock and
You can
roll
speak on
money
that.
is a tenth of hip hop money. Let's be real.
Now, right, rock and roll is like, wah, wah.
Hip hop is the new rock and roll.
Go ahead, my brother, speak on that.
Wow, so many thoughts. Well, when I started at Def Jam, two things struck me the most. I guess the first of all, on the island side, on the rock side, right, you sign an artist, you hire a producer, they go in the studio, album, that's it, like presto, like just add water. On the hip hop side,
Kept you more busy.
Yeah, right. I mean, one project is the same as 10 on.
It's about 10.
Yeah, between samples, side artists, tracking people down, 16 different producers, bits of elements that are in there, but you've got to figure out what they are, where they come from. Our first Jay-Z project I worked, the Black Album, was we sat in a conference room talking through all the issues, and AT was there, and we were looking at one of them, and someone said, okay, well, who do we need to reach out to for this? And someone said, well, Ox. I'm like, okay, I'm writing this down. I got to reach Ox. Where is Ox? He's in the hood. Okay, so I'm like a Cornell guy. I'm writing all this down. I got to find Ox in the hood. And still going on. Then, the second thing is just the entrepreneurialism. So Def Jam was the parent, the umbrella, but you had DTP, Disturbing the Peace, Ludacris Company. You had Rockefeller.
You had Bloodline, you had Murder,
right.
you had,
Yeah, I mean,
you had Rough Riders. It was all about these small pockets of energy from the streets. And you had really dynamic people who didn't necessarily have a Cornell or a Harvard education, but they were smart, whip smart, and they had this energy about them. They knew their product.
It's called swag.
Yeah, they knew their product, and no matter how many times the company said, "Well, I don't know about that," and they said, "I know." And if you trusted them, you're going to have a hit on your hands. But Michael's right, and when you're talking about hip-hop, you're talking about really a combination of a lot of different pieces of product. You're talking about a track that could have 3 producers. You're talking about them taking a piece from Bill Withers and putting it in and flipping it, a little O from James Brown and putting it in there. And so the music is a combination that's very, very difficult and very, very different from traditional rock music to clear, but that's what gives it its vitality. And what I've noticed, though, is that even though the music is a merger of different things, and now, because hip-hop is so prevalent, it's infused in everything that you look at. It's infused in your television program. There's dialogue from the culture that you see on any sitcom. There's the clothing is a derivative of what the kids used to wear in the hip-hop thing. So there is a lot of stuff there that when you look, you see the art form in every day. It doesn't have to be just pure hip-hop. It's there when Versace is walking, has their new line. It's always there.
Do you feel like it's what kids used to wear? Or do you feel like that's still? I mean, is that the aspect of?
I think it's still there. I think it's
being a bellwether for commerce. Do you feel that that's still relevant?
I think it's still relevant. I think it's very relevant. I think it's different. I think because it's not in its purest form, we don't always recognize it. But if you look closely, the logos on the shirt, that's a hip hop thing. It doesn't matter that Gucci's doing it or somebody else is doing it. Just the swag in it, just the way that the young kids do it. I have a daughter, and she wouldn't consider herself a hip hop head, but when I look at her and when she's doing the dances, I'm like, oh, okay, now, But she's into pop music, but there's still the pop music is infused with hip hop, and she doesn't even realize it sometimes. I'm like, no, that was so and so song. She's like, really?
So now these streams have crossed. At a point, there was all these other genres and other musical components in the industry, and now hip-hop has become a bit of an umbrella. It kind of blankets almost all genres, from country to EDM at this point. Is that fair to say?
Except pop and youth music, and I think we have to be careful because of the commercialization. And I like to beat up on the labels, but he's my friend, and she's my sister who sold out, but I still
Remember that.
My daughter said to me the other day, I said, well, how come you're not listening to more soul music? And she misunderstood me because she thought I was talking about hip-hop when I said soul, because I think she thought I was talking about black music, right? So she's like, but Dad, they don't make the music kid-friendly. And so what that said to me is, when I was younger, we rocking, we listening to Run DMC, and after 12th grade, I'm going straight to college. You know what I'm saying? The lyrics were like,
you could really rock with those lyrics on all age levels. A lot of what I'm a little bit concerned about, beloved,
Yes.
at the labels, is that there's no filter of balance that allows the growth of this amazing art form to continue to flourish and grow beyond where we are. I don't think it's good for the art in the culture, and I don't think it's good for the commerce, because those young kids are going to not adopt it. And it's gonna suffocate, and it's going to kill our run.
Because time is really short, let's use a particular example to speak to what you're talking about, and I'm curious to hear all of your opinions on this.
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber. And also the fact that Rick Ross, one of the most popular rap artists of the day, has been pulled up on a particular rap lyric with regard to rape. Lil Wayne has been pulled up on particular rap lyrics with regard to misogyny. Where do you see the disconnect between the label responsibility, the management responsibility, and art when it comes to these issues in 2013?
We knew this was coming.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Y'all braced for this one?
How do we deal with the Rick Ross question?
And it's not so much just a Rick Ross question, but
No, I
it's an
understand.
extreme example of a lot of foolishness that's been going on for a long time.
I'm a black woman. I have a black young daughter. I don't believe that art should be censored. I think that the artist has the right to express themselves however they choose to express themselves, whether you consider it ignorant or not. I think the public has the right to come down hard on them if they do. I think that there's consequences to that freedom. That the label does not tell Rick Ross, put this lyric in here. The label does not say, if this lyric is in here, that we can't exploit it. But when Ross has the consequence of saying that, he has to deal with it. We all deal with it. I think one of the problems that we're facing now, I think that there's been negative lyrics in hip hop and in other art forms since the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that it is because hip hop now is the dominant musical format or form, even though it's come down. I think that more people are being exposed to it. I think that our kids are more influenced by it, and therefore has more impact. When the artist says, this is how I want to express myself for whatever reason, sometimes, I think that given the dialogue of Ross says something negative, and people come back, I think it's a benefit. It opens up the dialogue for everybody. It opened up a dialogue about date rape. And I think it's beneficial to Ross to feel what happened. I think that, he really learned something. I think that it was like, wow, I don't think he meant it in that format that it was taken, but it was said. And when I saw his apology, the one that came out, the last one, and I was like, okay, I could feel that. I could feel, as a father, I didn't even think about it. Because you could get caught up in the moment. We've all been there. You get caught up in the moment, you say the wrong thing, you move the wrong way, you didn't mean to be interpreted that way. You didn't even realize it because you're just being, yourself or in that energy. And then you're like, wow, this is important. This is something that we need to talk about.
Isn't this just a more exaggerated version of the Charles Barkley "I'm not a role model" debate?
No, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, I don't think any of these people are role models. They're definitely not a role model in my household. The only role model my child has is me, I hope. I've been in hip hop for a long time, and I personally censor the music in my household. We also talk about these things. It does give me a platform for me to have discussions with my daughter, who is 12, and say, this is what they're talking about. And so she has the basis to understand it. I mean, all of us, I don't care who it is out here, nobody's going out and just listening to gospel music. I mean, sometimes there are a lot of parts of me, and sometimes hip-hop expresses the part of me that's black power. Sometimes hip-hop expresses the part of me that just, just wants to party. And I think we should let our artists do that. I don't think that we should say, we're only going to sell this type of music.
Well, I have to not let that go for my dearly beloved Antoinette. I happen to believe that, all influencers are some kind of model. So if you don't want to call it role model, certainly they're influencers.
Yes.
And as I've said to Russell Simmons numerous times, we can't make the case on Madison Avenue that we can influence purchasing decisions in a marketing campaign, but then duck the case when we are seeing a lifestyle of decadence and crime happening and say that we don't have nothing to do with that. We can't be influencers when it comes to us asking for money, but not be influencers when it comes to accepting social responsibility. So if we're going to do one way, if we're going to go one way, let's go all the way. Right. I'm not blaming labels. Well, actually, I am. only to the extent, because hey, Leo Cole was my client. I introduced him to Doug Morris to let him get in the room. Back in the time, I didn't care if you were white or not. Leo Cole was the valet for Run DMC. He used to carry the bags for Jam Master Jay, but he was a brilliant man. Jay-Z, the thing I have with Jay-Z, and I love him, Jay-Z is far more brilliant than some of the things that people talk about his past. The man is genius. Like, he's a brilliant guy. So I don't think people talk enough about that until now lately because of his business moves, but he's a genius guy. Leo's a genius guy. My thing about it is that we need more balance and we need a more clever understand of the business. If I tweet right now certain things from a certain brand, it's going to be picked up all over the world, from Japan to Nigeria, to UK, everywhere. It's just a global phenomenon. If we're not careful about how we balance out the art form, as well as we're not focusing on the business, the technology, and the allies all over the world, we're going to lose an opportunity. So I'm here today to say that hip-hop and those who are influencers in it or people who are working in the business of it, don't run away from it. Run to it, but find ways you can get allies, globalize it, respect the beginning part of the culture, because every foundation should respect its origins. But don't feel that you have to justify the buffoonery and the foolishness. Just empower what's great about it so that we can grow the business model.
Michael?
I'm sorry, just real quick. I mean, the technology goes both ways. So it is the new distributor, but it's also, in cases like this, we're cut out often.
Right.
Right. So in cases 10 years ago, technology was the label specifically. I mean, 10 years ago, Leor would sit down with artists and have conversations about social consciousness and how they want to present themselves and what image they want to give to the world. And Leor today, same person, but different time and different technology, wouldn't have that opportunity in a lot of cases, whether it's Rick Ross or Justin Bieber for that matter. Everything is instantaneous.
It's instantaneous, yeah. It's instantaneous, and you don't have, not that I think you necessarily should have all the control, but for example, the Lil Wayne track and the Ross track, neither one of them were released by the labels. These are something that, they existed, they're mixtape, they're kind of, you put it out on YouTube, you put it out, you tweet it, and you get the blowback after the fact, I mean, sometimes we talk about the label and the corporation as this, this machine, this entity. It's made up of people the same as you and me, we can get, when we have an artist, you don't want to go into the slippery slope of saying, you can only put this out, and this is the only music that we're going to listen to. All of us have to take responsibility to it. What's driving the industry is those million clicks that song got on YouTube, whether it be negative or positive. And the corporations, they look at it and they say, oh, this is popular, and this is going to make money. And I'm not necessarily listening only to, whether or not it's a positive influence or a negative influence. And I'm not saying this as a my individual thoughts. I have my own individual thoughts on certain things, and I control that. But I do know that whether it be a hip-hop artist or a painter. You know, there's a lot of art out there that I find objectionable. I wouldn't go see it. Might sign a petition to ban it, but I think that it's the artist's right to, you know, if they want to put feces on something, you know, okay, that's your thing. But, you know, it's not mine, and it's art, and it's considered art by certain people. It's just, it's hard. I mean, we're going to have to figure out how, I agree with Londell that there needs to be more diversity. When I was coming up, there was the gangster rap, and then there was the fun party rap, and there was the political rap, and I feel that we've kind of lost that diversity. I'm not sure why. I don't think it's just a corporate thing. I think it might be that that same thing I talked about before, where there was an energy driving the music. Not necessarily. It doesn't feel so much that way. It doesn't feel like there's a collective. It feels more individualized, so maybe that's part of the reason I couldn't tell you. I would love there to be more political rap. I would love there to be more, you know, music that you should just dance to, and you're not afraid to turn on the radio in your car when your kids are in the back seat, you know. So, but we all have to take responsibility for that.
Mr. Ehrlich?
I think the interesting thing is that with the internet, the corporations have actually become less powerful in terms of the music business. That will probably change over time. And the messages that are put out there, the record companies have less influence because, quite frankly, a lot of times nowadays, anybody could put out a message and it could be instantaneously broadcast all over the world. Companies can make decisions not to invest in, you know, certain areas, certain subjects, and I still think that is part of corporate responsibility. It is difficult though, because it's, you know, the record companies are in the business of making money, and quite frankly, they're having a hard time making money. And I don't work for a record label, but I see what's happening on the other side. If the record labels don't have money, they can't invest in artists, and then if artists can't have investment, they can't promote their art form. So it's not such an easy problem to solve. And I think eventually the democratic process of the internet and technology, as you talked about, there's ways already now that are being developed where people that make music can recoup what they've put into it. I think over time it'll sort itself out, but there's a lot. Right now we're living in very dynamic times, and we don't really know where it's going to all end up, quite frankly.
This is a hell of a can of worms we're opening up here, as you can see. And it's part of the reason why entities like the Cornell Hip Hop Collection are so important, because it's about the think tanks and the groups of people with the power to provide the type of funding that's going to allow us to teach this information at the academy level on a consistent basis that will make panels like this and jobs like all of us do up here worthwhile in the end. So again, please, we are sincerely soliciting as much help as we can possibly get from our alumni friends and from our friends outside of the university to say, hey, this is the correct way to teach hip-hop culture. It is not about rap music. It is not about one particular artist's lyrics. It is not about one particular piece of the culture, but rather teaching it from a round and comprehensive manner, very much the same way we all learned the disciplines that have given us the degrees that we sit here with today. This is just as important a piece of Americana as baseball, apple pie, politics. Trust me when I tell you, there's somebody within 5 degrees of your life that believes that hip-hop is the bellwether for the rest of the world. And whether you understand it or not, it is. And as you can tell from my esteemed panelists here, there's a great deal of discussion that goes on behind the scenes and in the locker rooms. You know, let's make a basketball analogy. The fans don't see Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson barking at each other in the locker room. They see rings, they see banners, they see W's. This type of locker room talk is extremely vital to be brought to the academy level. so that we can change the parameters of how the culture is taught. Because to date, despite the fact that there are a great deal of highly intelligent professors, very well-read educators, and people who are putting this information out there, the average student learning hip-hop at the academy level is equivalent to the athlete who is playing for a coach that never played the game they're coaching. You wouldn't want that for your son or your daughter. I don't want it for my son. So I think in that aspect, we're all on the same page. And before we go any further, I want to give a special thank you to our incredible panelists today for your amazing information. So please have a round of applause. I feel like we need like a retreat for this to be completed. Yeah, without a doubt.
We're going to do some
So we'll go into a Q&A.
We're going to do some Q&A with the audience. I need to shout somebody out just briefly because someone said I want to hear more political rap. Ray Ramirez, class of '92, the leader of the welfare poets, is doing it big. Everybody needs to check them out. That's Cornell right there. I'm going to pass the mic to my man right here. I'll do my best, Montel Williams. How you doing?
Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Kia, and they didn't even pay me to say this, but I was actually a part of the class last semester, and it was awesome. DJ Rich Medina came to teach a couple lectures on DJing. It was really cool stuff. So yeah, help them out. That's awesome. But my actual question is, it's not every day you meet someone who knows Kanye West, and so I was wondering if you could get some adventures with Kanye.
Well, as an attorney, you know, there's an ethical rule of attorney-client, and so I'm going to punt that to their label, Mike and Antoinette, who can share some more music, artistic stories about Kanye. But let me say this: this is one of the most passionate, like, just I've got to exercise what I'm trying to do. People I've ever met in my life. If once it comes into his kind of space, he wants to execute on it, and he's just very, very passionate, good, bad, or indifferent, you know. And he, you know, I don't know if you remember, we used to spend like hours in the conference room just listening to music, and he had all his songs on his arm, and he'd tell you about each one, his tattoos. Just very, very passionate, uber creative.
He's a true artist.
True artist.
True artist.
Actually, this is interesting. His mom, you know, from the soul era, so he listened to so much soul music, right? A lot of the early hip hop is, you know, had a lot of Caribbean influences, a lot of soul, gospel, bluesy things. He was into all of that. Right, AT? You're Mike.
No,
Mike, what do you guys?
Yeah, I mean, he's the true artist, honestly. And I mean, he commercially, different story, but you've got to trust him. I learned that the first time when he did 4 different versions of the Jesus Walks video. Ended up costing like as much as like a small independent movie. But you watch them. I mean, all 4 versions are different and incredible. We went to watch The Throne. They did a listening party at the planetarium up at the Museum of Natural History.
Yeah.
And he was there, Jay was there, and it was just, he's just an intense person. Just watching him at the listening event, even though we had heard it a million times, I'm sure it was his creation, but just watching his intensity of listening and focusing, it was just...
And he's an expression. Like, he gives you whatever, he's going to express it.
Right.
Right? You know, we know how.
At the
Sometimes good, bad, or indifferent, he's going to express it.
Yeah.
It's coming out. You know, like that song, Don't Push Me Because I'm Close to My Edge. They were talking about him like 20 years before he was even born, probably.
Yeah.
That's Kanye.
Shout out to Raheem. Beyonce made the best video of all time. My man right here, class of '97.
Hello, everyone. My name is Just Clerk Morissette. I'm an author. I just wanted to ask the panel and address some of the people here because we are at the Entrepreneurial Network. Is lowering the barrier to entry for artists something that music executives and labels are interested in doing? I understand that it's difficult to sift through the high number of candidates to find the most talented ones, but I also feel that with so many obstacles challenging aspiring artists that many potential superstars give up or go undiscovered. Is anyone looking to create a platform, an American Idol for rappers, so to speak, to help artist discovery?
Wow.
So many artists are discovered these days just purely based on their YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Before labels ever heard of them. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's the barriers to entry are, it's a great thing in a way. They're as low as they've ever been. And when I look on the label side of things, at the entrepreneurs who are out there, who are the most successful, the ones I envy the most, you look at Rock Nation, you look at Cash Money, the independent labels. There's Glassnote. I mean, there's some. It's a great time if you've got a bit of funding and somebody with you believe in their talent. It's a great time to be an entrepreneur.
To speak to your point about an idol, so to speak, show for rappers, that has been tried. Unfortunately, the problem is the television business, and the television business is all about ratings and sponsorship. And actually, if you look at the audience of American Idol, it's mostly, kids under 10 and, people over the age of 45, believe it or not. That has been the quandary. A lot of kids that want to listen to rap are not going to watch it on television. Right. They're going to watch it on the internet or however else they, get their music these days.
Putting it on a television, a produced television show kind of maybe loses some of its authenticity. I think that people like to discover their rapper and their favorite artist, and you kind of lose that when it's force-fed to you on American Idol with 15 judges saying you're the best. People want to feel that themselves.
Which you can find it on thesource.com or go to our Twitter at The Source and go to the Unsigned Hype that everybody knows about. The Unsigned Hype, which is responsible for discovering a lot of people from Common, Mobb Deep, Eminem, the Notorious B.I.G. Unsigned Hype at The Source, source.com.
I'm my friend Chris Wondry. Hey guys, so you guys talked a lot about technology as the new distributor, and with technology and the internet there's data, and a lot of it. And I think you talked a little bit about this, but can you give us more insight into how the business is using all of this data?
I mean, it's not only the music industry, it's every industry using, when people click on, and it's just for ad purposes, you can micro target your product because what songs they like, what clothes they like to wear, where they're from and their age, and what time they go on to the music site versus, so you can really, really narrow that down. I think that one of the ways the industry uses it beyond that is for looking for artists. They do look for artists on there. They look to see who people think are popular. They look to see what's trending. We do a lot of our marketing now that way because we know that, again, this discovery, that one-on-one discovery people feel when they go online. So in our meetings, it's really crazy. We can't even sometimes talk about what date this album is coming out because the artist wants to be the first person to tweet it. So they don't want to even tell you when the album was supposed to be released so that it doesn't leak, so that the artist has that one-on-one interaction with their fans. Mm-hmm. We get, you won't be able to, the artwork, putting the album cover up, the first time so that the fans experience that. We use a lot of that fan experience thing that the internet provides for us. Digital sales are now becoming more and more important. Physical is becoming reduced because we have young people who that's all they do. They don't know what a CD is, They think it's a pain in the behind. I know my daughter's like, why do you have all of these things? I'm a very, tactile type person. I like to touch it. And she's like, oh, please, mommy. Like, put it on a wave and we're good to go.
You still got the 45s?
The other thing that it is becoming more of a income provider for us too. We have Now we're starting to get more performance monies. We're starting to get more streaming money. It can really become very, very lucrative. There was a point in time where it looked like it was about to be the end of the industry, and I know for a fact that our label has shrunk because of the lack of people paying for records and people not respecting the copyright and the energy that the artist puts forth. But now it's, like Londell said, it has become the new venue. It's about content. You know, it's about discovering something. It's about having it on your phone at a moment's notice when you think about it. And it's definitely becoming something that's more profitable for the industry.
And I agree with, I would agree with it. It's just a new asset that's being sold and transferred. And that's why I think, again, technology, in addition to being a new distributor, is an equalizer. And so, of course, you know, how you mine your data, how you are able to share it and present it and make case studies around it will be key. So there's a whole new digital intelligence that digital learning that's happening. So those artists and those entrepreneurs that are able to connect the two, there's a tremendous opportunity for you entrepreneurs to deal with the whole digital intelligence, data mining, technology-based content solutions. All of that is really what's happening right now, and then looking at how advertisers are dealing with that because they're buying in that space. So advertisers are now the new marketing partners for people who create or distribute music.
Right.
And labels are now getting that as well. And we joke around, and I can because we really do have a great relationship, but let me just say this for a record before we go. I absolutely love Def Jam. I love these people to my left. We're just kidding around. Def Jam celebrating their 30th anniversary last year. They were the Source's a label of the year. Let's give a hand to Def Jam. And it's just a tremendous opportunity and plethora of ways to get into hip-hop right now. We talked a lot about music, but hip-hop is far more than the music, and we have to keep talking about it. It's far more than the music. It's just wide open. It's exciting. You know, we got into a little dark space about, you know, some of the lyrics and stuff, but, you know, just turn the lights back on this conversation. It is exciting right now in hip-hop. People who thought hip-hop was not going to last, not only is it lasted, it is the biggest thing popping around the world. It's not just in the hood, it's everywhere. Used to sing in the shower, now little girls are rapping in the shower. It is just like that, and I mean, you got to give the founders a special shout out. And the one thing I want to say before I probably close is that, you know, every culture takes care of their own and those that started in the culture. Somehow, some way, and I don't think this is a labels issue. I think it's kind of all of our issues to try to figure out a model, how we take care of some of those pioneers who set the tone before there was commerce and a business model. They were out front to create what many of those that are in business now are benefiting from, and we have to figure out a way to how to show some kind of appreciation and thanks, and I think that's one of the things that this program and other programs like it can do. So we should talk about how to support it, because they were the ones, they're the founding fathers of this thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Give it up for the pioneer.
Huh?
Give it up for the pioneer.
And sisters and mothers, because there were some sisters out there today. So I just wanted to, it's a celebration in hip-hop. It's a plethora of opportunities. Let's find a way to connect. Gligor, you're an internationalist. It's all over the world, brother. All over the world. It can't be stopped. And it's not just music. It's everything.
And the next question is from the class of 2011.
I'm Mylar 2011. My name's Ama Osei. So talking about sisters, I am the older sister to an 18-year-old brother who is interested in becoming a producer. So my question, maybe a two-part, but maybe one and the same, is first, how do you recommend for someone who's interested solely in producing, how do they sort of break into the industry? But most importantly, my concern for him is making sure that he protects himself. So he has a friend who is a lyricist, if you will. So when he works with him, how does he ensure that should this individual make it become successful, then my brother can still protect himself with regards to the work that he's done on the production end, making the beats, but also overall production of the LP or the track.
In terms of making it as a producer, becoming recognized as a producer, I think the same advice I'd give to that person I'd give to anybody going into the music business or any aspect of the entertainment business is that first of all, one is to realize it's very difficult, of course, but I can't overstate how difficult it is to break in, because the amount of people that want to do it versus the ones that the industry can actually support are, quite at odds with each other. But so somebody like that should really use every mechanism, every relationship, every 5, degrees of separation they have. And then I've always also recommended to producers that they try to find some great artists to work with, because if you go approach labels, and Michael, you could probably agree with this, is that oftentimes labels, they'll want to hear a great new beat, they might even want to hear a great new song, but if you go to them with a great new artist, it really tends to open eyes. So I always recommend to new producers, hey, if you could link yourself with a great artist, that really gives you a leg up. As far as protecting themselves if they're working with somebody, obviously it's great if you could have a lawyer involved. Not everybody could afford that. There is a lot of good online information. It's an amazing thing that there's so much more information than ever was available for people that, guests who can't even afford a formal lawyer. I'm not saying that you should do it by yourself, but there are steps that you could take to help protect yourself, and then sometimes it's worth the investment to find a competent professional who can help protect you in the event that things really happen, so you know that you can get your just reward.
And I think also, as an independent artist who hasn't ever been affiliated with a label or had that type of protection myself, I think it's about taking care of the congregation that's taking care of you right now just the same, because if the record deal doesn't come through, what do you have? Is it I get a deal or I go get a job, or is it I get a deal or I go back to doing this gig, doing this thing that I'm trying to get a deal for less money than I think I deserve? That's a heavy debate as an entrepreneur. You want to put all your eggs in one basket? You want to put all the bullets in that clip? Or do you want to stay in the gym? There's an old saying that my friends and I use. There's a difference between a guy who can fight and a guy who goes to the dojo. The guy who goes to the dojo ends fights, whether people know about it or not. You gotta be in the woodshed. You gotta be doing push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks every day. Otherwise, executives on this level have no rationale but to take you at face value. If all there is face value, they're gonna like it for the time they see it, but when the next person comes along who's equivalent talent with a different color shirt, different intonation in their delivery, and they got trailer load of beats and a crew behind them and groundswell and YouTube hits that grant them access that someone who doesn't have it has to work for, you got to look at the odds that you're stacked up against. It's a prosumer age. So it's about being prolific and making as many of those beats that he thinks are label worthy as possible.
On a practical level, he should copyright, make sure that he registers his copyright. Make sure that he should probably reach out to, the organizations like ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. They have a lot of meetings where they sit down with writers and they have writers workshops and they give them really practical information. It will help him. If he's going to be in this business, he needs to start to learn the basics of the business, because we find a lot of the artists have no clue what they're getting themselves into. And this is a billion-dollar industry. He needs to, if he can't afford a lawyer, there's a lot of different venues that he can go to that he can start learning about the business that he wants to be in. And a lot of them are free. So go on the ASCAP website, the BMI website, the CSAC website, try to find out, he could try to partner with some of their people. He will network. He will learn what it is that, you know, established, successful writers and producers did, and he will start to become a face in the crowd that they know, and they might actually reach out and help him.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, but there will be an opportunity to mingle with the panelists upstairs right afterwards. And the final question is going to come from one of our pioneers in the room, Raheem from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5.
Oh man, I'm not looking, I don't have my Ivy League swagger on today. But let me just say, with all due respect to my esteemed panelists, the hip-hop culture, I have had the fortunate pleasure of watching it grow from its inception to becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but once anything that starts out grassroots and is embraced by corporations, and they put $2 into it, it changes the nature of what it used to be forever. So all of the hip-hop purists, I will include myself in that contingency of people to a degree, but on the other side of the coin, I'm a realist and I understand the way that business works. However, we do have a moral responsibility to you know, the population of future leaders and you know, that we influence. We are influencers. Absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with that, Londell. And because of that fact, I don't necessarily feel as though artists should be censored. However, not to point the finger at anyone, isn't it basically corporate America that has the corporate dollars to put into the promotion and marketing of these products that we are influenced by? So I liken bad music to I guess, unhealthy nutrition. And visual and audible images, audible and visual images are things that enter into our subconscious mind without our permission. And so if all you hear every day of your young, impressionable life is, you know, I sling keys and, you know, I shoot people, and ultimately that's what you will become, because you've ingested that to such a degree that, so what do we do to essentially change that, corporate America?
I wonder who he's talking to.
It's well, it's the crux of the issue, really, when it comes right down to it. When we're talking about hip-hop and the culture and the music, that's the crux of it, is the commercialization versus the purity of the art form. I mean, I look at, like, Nicki Minaj last summer, who got booed at Summer Jam because she performed her song Starships, right? Because I guess the crowd was, not feeling that was who she should be, and the type of pure hip-hop that she should be performing. I guess it's the issue again of do you want to reach a larger audience and change people's minds on a broader scale, if you can possibly, if you have a message. I think back to like a Bob Marley, right? When he first came out, the decision was made by the people who surrounded him and by the Island Records to present him to the world as a rock star, not as a reggae artist. So he performed in Madison Square Garden with an electric guitar, a Gibson guitar, and that was, he reached a worldwide global population, still, still exists, and that message still exists. So it's not our decision, it's not corporate America's decision for sure, it's the artists to make that call in the end, I guess. Do they want to reach a broader audience and still try to maintain the purity in the message? And it's a hard balance.
I mean, hip hop. I don't know. I always think when people say corporate America or the government, that it puts the onus outside of themselves. These are not foreign bodies that came down from Mars and landed here to make decisions for you. You know, these companies exist and they have people in it, and some of the people don't agree with what the artist is saying, but they're gonna, the artist is saying it, and some people agree with it, some people like it. I think that, again, we're talking about we don't want to censor, which is true, and you definitely don't want the corporation to censor what is art and what is good art. We still do have a responsibility as people to look over stuff, and I believe me, we sit in meetings and sometimes things happen. I'm just like, what? Why are they saying that? And what is that video? What's going on? But this is what the artist wants to put out. What I would challenge anybody to do is we have to, as a people, as a culture, examine ourselves. It's not just hip hop that has these imagery. TV is filled with the reality shows, and the ones that sell the most and the ones that do the best are the ones that have the worst people on there. Okay, we look at the news. The news cycle is worse than any hip-hop song I have ever heard. When I look at TV, sometimes I have to turn it off because we as a culture, for some reason, are enamored with the basest part of our natures. That's something that's not just a corporation. That's something that's just not hip-hop. That's all of us, and that's everything. And I don't exactly understand why. Maybe it's the whole thing about watching a train wreck and something that's bloody, and you're thinking, oh, this is something I need to see, good or bad. Yes, we need more diversity. I think that's what it is. I don't think that you necessarily have to censor what someone wants to say. I would love there to be more artists coming out saying something different. And if people support it, believe me, the corporation will sell it because it will make money. If tomorrow gospel music goes platinum every time we put it out, the whole platform will be gospel music. It is what it is. So don't put the onus just on the corporation. We as a culture, we're into violence, we're into sex, we're into, I don't know why we are. And that's why our television looks like that, that's why our newspapers look like that, that's why our music sounds like that. Personal responsibility is buy something else, or buy an artist, or support another artist who's going to come out and say this. I do. I want to make sure that we have a diverse roster of music in my house. I know on the label, we don't just have artists who are just talking about drugs and sex. We do have, even though people talk badly about him, there is a Justin Bieber. We do have Neo. We do have a lot of different, we have Chrisette Michele. We have a lot of different artists who have a different perspective. Sometimes the Chrisette album won't sell as much as the Rick Ross album. That's the public's choice.
Thank you again to our amazing panel this evening. And we do have some more refreshments. This bar will open and we're going to clear the floor from the chairs. So enjoy your evening. Thank you.